Sure.
Well, good afternoon. I'm going to call this session of the Issaquah Hearing Examiner to order. It's September 19, 2017. The item that we're hearing today are actually two applications, and both relate to the same proposed development on Mallard Bay. One is for a critical area variance. It's an application that the proponent has filed to look for deviations from protective measures established around streams and wetlands. And the second application is for approval of a preliminary plat to subdivide the property into lots that then can be sold for development of housing. In each of these applications, it's my responsibility as hearing examiner to consider information submitted from three different sources and then make a determination if the applications are consistent with the criteria that's been established in state law and by your city council in municipal ordinances. The information comes, first of all, from professional staff. We have a experienced professional planner here today, Mr. Niven, who has prepared staff reports on both applications. I believe they've been available for the past week or so, and hopefully those here today have had a chance to review those. Mr. Niven will go through each of those staff reports, which results then in a recommendation made by the City Planning Department as to whether these applications should be approved and what conditions should be applied. I also want to hear from the applicant representatives. I think there are several in the room this afternoon, and we want to give the applicant a sufficient time to present all information that they believe should be considered by me. The burden of proof is upon the applicant to show that the application should be approved. And then finally, I want to hear from any members of the public not affiliated with city or applicant that have any questions or comments or concerns about the application. Those three sources of information then provide the facts that I rely upon to make conclusions of law as to the consistency of the application with the criteria for approval. If we do get all the information today, I will close the record and then issue a decision within 10 days. If it is necessary to keep the record open to obtain additional information, that's one thing we can do, and I'll make that determination during the course of the hearing. In that case, we will set a specific date and time by which additional information must be submitted and be very specific as to what information is required, often issuing a post-hearing order to make certain we get the necessary information. My name is Ted Hunter. I'm with Sound Law Center, and we've been chosen by your mayor and council to make decisions on applications and certain appeals that come before the city. We have rules of procedure that we've issued several years ago, and we follow those in the hearings. I have a copy in front of me, and if we get into any procedural conflicts or confusions, we'll reference the rules of procedure. But they're pretty straightforward, and it sets the order of presentation, which typically city goes first, applicant second, collect any questions, comments, or concerns from public, and then allow the city and applicant to respond to those questions, comments, or concerns. This proceeding is being recorded. In fact, it's a videotape or whatever, DVD tape. It's recorded both sound and visual. And that becomes the permanent record. If there's an appeal of my decision, it's based only on the record that's established in this hearing room today. To help ensure the reliability of the record, we ask that when you present information, you do so under oath or affirmation. Okay, it looks like we're ready to proceed. Everybody looks awake and ready to go forward. So we will do that with initially the city presentation by the Planning Director, Keith Niven. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hearing Examiner, and thank you. So I'm going to give a brief presentation this afternoon to provide the background and context for the applications and ultimately the proposed decision from the administration. So Mallard Bay.
You'll do that under oath, which we'll administer at this time. And
yes.
Do you swear to tell truth in information you give today?
I do. Thank you. So Mallard Bay critical area variance, VAR 16-00002 and preliminary plat PP 16-00005.
Now, you have on the screen in front of you some PowerPoint slides, it appears.
And the computer would not be responding, which is a good way to start.
Oh, they're not advancing for you?
It is not advancing for me. Okay, hang on. There we go. Okay.
I wanted to ask you, did you intend to have these slides as an exhibit as part of this record?
If they would be helpful for the hearing examiner. There's no new information in these slides, but I figured that would maybe be of assistance to you in your decision.
Okay, thank you. We will then give them a sequential exhibit number. Also, as a preliminary, are you looking at the two applications combined? Is that what you intend to do in your presentation?
I am. I'm gonna provide a, kind of a summary of both applications.
Okay, because exhibits to date have been labeled either V1 through VX variance or PP for preliminary plat, but this relates to both.
It does. Sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll come up with another designation. We'll call it hearing exhibit, and it's hearing exhibit 1.
Thank you.
You know, Mr. Niven, I wonder if I might ask a few questions about procedures that led to this hearing today that might be helpful for me to answer questions I had, and then we can go into the substance.
That would be
There's
great.
some preliminary questions I had. And one was about notice of this hearing today. There's several dates that are floating around, and maybe you know the exact date, but what I looked at is that the preliminary plat exhibit 1 notice of application is dated June 28th, but there's an affidavit of sign installation dated February 2nd, 2017. That may just be a typo. I think the applicant gave the February 2nd, or maybe you can help me understand how the notice of application and then the sign installation. And if you can't, it's really more of an applicant question, but I just wanted to alert to that. And the reason I want to alert to these things is to make certain that notice was properly given, because it is part of procedural due process, and there is some public interest in this application, so I want to make certain that we're in strict compliance with the notice of the hearing.
So I'm reading on page 3 of the staff report for the critical area variance.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at under item 2, apparently there's not an item 3, my apologies. 1, 2, 3, the 4th bullet point identifies the site was posted with the hearing date on August 30th, 2017, and notice was sent to adjacent property owners and parties of record on August 22nd, 2017. And then notice was placed in the Issaquah Reporter, which is our newspaper of record, on the 25th of August, 2017.
Okay, that's very helpful, and I can see now that there was some handwritten dates in there.
Yes, there was.
So your department probably did a little bit of inquiry on that as well. But we'll use those dates then on that page 3, as you just shared. And that also tells me that the site was posted, and it was mailed, and also in the newspaper. And that's what's required under your ordinances and under RCW 3670B, which is the procedures established in the Regulatory Reform Act by the state legislature. So I will find that the notice was properly given, and we'll use the dates in the staff report because that's your certainty that those are the dates. There was some other inconsistency in dates. I think the staff report for preliminary plat had August 25th as a date for mailing, but we'll use the date of August 22nd. Is that your understanding as well, that both the variance and the plat notice of hearing were given on the same date?
Yes, they were.
Okay. And that's not unusual. We'll just want to clear up the dates so that we don't give too many dates, which then looks like it was a confusing notice. The notice is given on page 3 of August 30th for posting, August 22nd for mailing, and August 25th for publication. This is an important aspect of the decision I write so that we are certain that notice was properly given. And I may ask, after the hearing date today, because you do have that in your staff report, and it references an Exhibit 1, which are the affidavits of notice, and that Exhibit 1 includes the sign installation, but not the publication and mailing. So to make sure the file's complete, I may ask that those be provided after the hearing. And I'll make a note of that and make sure that that's in any post-hearing order that I issue. Okay, based on your testimony then, I'm going to make a finding for the record that notice of this hearing was properly given. Another preliminary question before we get into the substance is that the application itself is not part of the exhibits that I received, and I'm assuming you've seen those and used them to develop your staff report. Is that something that your office could provide in a memo or a filing after the hearing today?
Absolutely. Those are in the file in our office.
Okay, great. And final preliminary question. This has been around or been reviewed for a while, and I'm wondering if there's been any amendments to the comprehensive plan or zoning code since the date of complete application, which was given of December 2016. So anything happened this year that would have affected this parcel in terms of zoning or comp plan?
None that come to mind.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to address those questions. And now let's move forward with hearing exhibit number 1, which are a series of slides. Do you know how many slides there are?
There might be 9 or 10.
Okay.
I don't
Good.
remember exactly.
And we'll number the pages as you go. Okay, please proceed.
Thank you. So first off, just starting to make sure we all understand where we're talking about. The project site is located kind of in the northeast quadrant of the city. This is East Lake Sammamish, and this is 43rd Way, and there's a large roundabout at the corner. The first phase of Mallard Bay was constructed on the north side of 43rd, and this phase was never constructed and is the subject of the applications we're discussing today. Here's what the original Mallard Bay approval looked like. So as you can see, there's basically condominiums on the north side, and this side on the south side that never got constructed was envisioned to be a much higher density project to fit with the zoning that's on the site, which is a multifamily, high density. Part of, and I'm just going to go ahead and do that now, part of the mitigation for this original approval was a wetland mitigation site down here at the south end of the property, and that'll come into play later when we talk about the critical area variance. I don't want to open that door too wide right now. So the preliminary plat, what has been submitted is 34 single-family homes, so 34 lots. The zoning, as I mentioned earlier, is multifamily high, which allows 29 units per acre. The proposal works out to be about 2.6 units per acre, so it's significantly less than what is allowed by zone. But the zoning does allow for single-family homes. The minimum lot size doesn't come into play because it's a multifamily parcel. The setbacks, 10 feet front, 5 feet rear, and 20 feet side, those have been met, and the impervious surface limit is at 141, where 286,000 is allowed. Maximum building heights proposed is within the 40 feet that's allowed by zone. Parking, they're proposing a minimum of 2 parking spaces per lot. Where the driveways can be long enough, there will be additional parking on lot in the driveways. And then there's an additional 6 parking spaces that are proposed on top of the detention vault, which sits right here. And then there's 24 conditions of approval that are proposed with this plat. We have, I submitted.
Before you move on.
Yes.
I wanted to ask about the density, because this city is planning under the Growth Management Act, correct?
Yes.
And that's RCW 3670A. And under that act, you have to meet certain growth projections and zone in accordance with that. And here, the density is much less than would be allowed under its zoning.
Right.
Can you briefly describe how this can still meet the GMA?
Sure. There's a little bit finer grain conversation about the city's plans. So when the city approved the sub-area plan for Central Issaquah, it also applied to Puget Sound Regional Center to be a regional growth center. So we have designated the core of Central Issaquah, which is 400-plus acres, as a regional growth center. And with that came the acceptance by the city of additional housing units beyond our county-wide target. So we have now planned capacity within Central Issaquah core to accommodate over 7,700 additional housing units. So right now, the city council is focusing their policies and decision-making on facilitating housing within the regional growth center, and this would not be part of the regional growth center. So there's, I think from a policy standpoint, clear direction from the city council to facilitate our housing growth and the densities that we're looking at within Central Issaquah and not necessarily on the periphery. So because the code allows for single family within the multifamily zone, I think you also take a look at this piece of property in terms of services and transit and other things that are beneficial to multifamily development. And this location doesn't kind of garner much in terms of services because it's on kind of the northern periphery of the city. So for all of those reasons, I think the city believes that although we would obviously approve a multifamily project in this location, single family, which is also allowed, meets the vision as currently held by the city council.
Okay, if I understood you correctly, then, you sort of looked at this outside the regional growth center as maybe extra capacity beyond what was required by GMA. Therefore, whether it's single-family or multifamily, still meets the obligations of the Growth Management Act. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Sure. So now we're going to get to a little bit of complication as it relates to this application. So at the very northern end of the property, and that's this area up here, there's an existing King County trail easement. And the applicant and King County have been working over the past months to figure out how a regional trail could move through this piece of property. Basically, I think the idea is to connect areas farther north with Lake Sammamish State Park, which
Now,
is,
you're looking at slide 6,
I am looking at slide
and it shows
6.
the proposed plat layout.
Right.
And what are you indicating with the arrow? Is that where the existing trail system might be?
So the area, so the trail, so right now, I think if you look at the staff report for the preliminary plat, there was an original Exhibit 3. And I'm going to look for it myself. Apologize for not having it in front of me.
I see one
Exhibit
that
3.
has-
It's on page 18 of the preliminary
Yeah,
plat staff
and it's
report.
colored as kind of an orangey regional trail and a different color, pinkish, as possible extension? Is that what I'm
Yes.
looking? Okay.
Yes, that's exactly what we're looking at. So the proposal from the applicant to King County was to take that existing 50-foot trail easement, which again is on the north end of the property, and relocate it to allow for the trail to come up from East Lake Sammamish Parkway up to the entrance of the subdivision plat. And then they were proposing to then take the trail east-west through the plat and stub it at the eastern property boundary. And the eastern property boundary to this plat is property owned by state parks. So this area that they would have stubbed the trail to is owned by state parks. And the idea would be then you could potentially continue that trail through the state park property to connect it with where King County would potentially like for it to be. Like I said, those conversations kind of transpired over several months. And then the county expressed a desire for the trail in this location to, rather than go through the middle of the subdivision plat and stub at the state park property, to actually continue it all the way up the frontage of 43rd and end it at a piece of property that's owned by Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District. So I believe that the applicant is considering the cost and the critical area impacts of that alignment. So what's been submitted to the hearing examiner is an exhibit which is identified as PP 16-0005 replacement conditions number 2 and 20, and note for Exhibit 3. And what's being proposed is a new condition 25, which would replace conditions 2 and 20 in the preliminary plat staff report, and provides this exhibit that's currently up on the screen, which, if you can see, what's been done is that the lots that used to be at this northern end have been removed. And right now, the only thing that the applicant is proposing within the trail easement is the turnaround for the street. The way the condition reads is it leaves the door open for either plat layout to move forward ultimately to final plat, depending on the success of the conversations between the applicant and King County. So if the applicant and King County can agree on the trail running up the frontage from East Lake Sammamish all the way to the northern end, and that's a number of conversations. It's not only the alignment, but it's also how wide's the trail, what kind of landscaping would go with that trail, what kind of signage would go with that trail. That's handled under new condition 25B. So if there's a relocation of the existing 50-foot trail easement, then that's what is intended under 25B, and it gives some different ways that the applicant and the county can resolve that question prior to submitting final plat documents.
All right, let me catch up with you.
Yeah, sorry.
Because you did submit, as I came into the room, and we had a brief conversation up here before the hearing began, discussing procedures at the hearing, plus you alerted me to 2 new exhibits. So the one you're now referencing, which is a memo to me from you dated September 18, is what you're referencing in your testimony. I'm going to mark that as hearing exhibit number 2. And in hearing exhibit number 2, this is where you're proposing the replacement condition.
Yes.
Okay. So I have that now in front of me. Now, are there copies available for others, or have the applicant and others seen this?
So the applicant has seen this. I gave a copy to King County, and I have one extra, and I'll put it over here.
Okay, all right. Because during the course of this hearing, I'll accept testimony on that and then determine where we go from there.
Absolutely. So I think at this point, all 3 parties, the applicant, King County, and the city, would like to see the trail from East Lake Sammamish to the north property line along 43rd. I think I can say that. I don't want to speak for anybody else in the room, so they can correct me if I'm misrepresenting their perspective. I think the issue that I heard from the applicant is not wanting to be in a prolonged negotiation with King County on the potential relocation of this northern easement. So if that could happen in maybe a fairly quick way, I think they'd be willing to look at that and look at the costs and the critical area impacts. And if not, then they're willing to, I think, just leave the 50-foot trail easement as it's currently recorded on the property at the northern end. Okay. So next, I'm gonna actually leap to the critical area variance. So part of this property is taking a look at all the critical areas that are on this property. As I mentioned before, there's a fairly substantial wetland at the southern end. That wetland was the subject of a previous mitigation effort. There is a stream that runs through the property. And then you have some isolated wetlands. And then at the northern end of the site is steep sloped area. So as you start to look at how you actually get onto this piece of property, your choices are fairly limited. And what the applicant has requested, and that's the critical area variance that's in front of the hearing examiner today, is basically to allow for the road to bridge over the stream or the creek as it heads towards 43rd. And there would be also some impacts to the exempt wetland that's in this area. So this is the request for the critical area variance. It's actually to allow the property owner to get to the interior of the property, which is not critical area. Not as many critical areas. And so that's the second part of this, and there's a separate staff report relating to that request. So with that, that's the end of
Well,
what...
hold on for a minute.
was gonna
Critical
go sit
area
down.
variance, is it only for the stream buffer or also for wetland? I cannot tell.
It's only for the stream buffer.
Okay, because in the staff report, it's noted, and this begins on page 1, and then it's in Exhibit 2, that for the stream buffer impact for road crossing will require also impact to wetland A, and that one you testified is exempt,
Right.
and 973 square feet of temporary impact to wetland B.
So there's, the other temporary impacts are in this location here. So when they dig out their vault, so this is the stormwater vault here in the southwest corner, there will be some impacts that will be then restored after the construction activities are complete. So they're considered temporary.
And so no variance needed?
I don't believe there's a variance needed for those.
Okay. And so if we're looking only at the stream, you may not have this in your head, but you might. What section of the critical area code addresses the need for a stream buffer such that there's a variance needed?
You're correct. I do not have that in my head, but I think I can find it fairly quickly. So, there's, well, the variance criteria is 1810-430. I would need to look through city code if you want me to give you the reference for how far you can impact the stream buffer before a variance is required.
Okay, we might need to get that post-hearing, and I'm looking for two things. One I could find in your code, which deals with mitigation for streams, and that's 1810-795. But prior to that, I'm assuming in your critical code there is a buffer set, and that's what I couldn't find reference to. And we're here looking for a variance from the requirement that's given in your code. It'd be helpful to know what is that requirement.
I agree.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And again, I can see this emerging as a need for a post-hearing order, if you will, where we identify the need for some additional information.
Sure.
Okay. All right, now I interrupted you. You were about to move past the critical area variance?
I was going to let you know that I'm more than happy to answer any questions for you right now, or if you want to turn it over to the applicant, I'm more than happy to step aside, and I know I'm not leaving the room, so I'll be around later.
Let me ask you about the process that you're following. And are you now wrapping up the critical area portion of the hearing and then move to preliminary plat? Is that what you intend to do?
So I believe I've walked us through background on both the preliminary plat and the critical area variance.
Okay.
I do have that IMC citation if you want that number.
That'd be great.
It's 1810, thank you, Christopher, 775A, stream crossings.
And how does that reads that a variance may be necessary, but does it set the buffer that's otherwise required?
It's a class 2. All right, we're gonna do a little bit of code sleuthing, and we'll provide you with that reference.
Okay, and whether it's today or later, the important thing is that when we establish a variance, I mean, typically, for example, a setback variance, as you referenced earlier, a 20-foot setback is required, then we can say a variance of 5 feet from the 20-foot setback is granted. And I want to be careful that we know to what extent we're granting a variance if we decide to do so.
Okay.
So we can get that later, that's fine. Another question I had for you, and I know you're referencing your code, section 795 of 1810, for not only the generic variance criteria in 430, but also to comply with variance, you look at the criteria in 1810 795. It's in the 430 section, item G, which requires a cumulative impact analysis. And this is kind of a sleeper, if you will, or hidden in your code. I didn't see it in your staff report. Is it something that you considered when you recommended approval of this variance?
So I will tell you I probably missed it. 430G, reasonable use, cumulative impact. I believe that I owe you that analysis.
Okay, and I don't think there's any surprises there, but again, to have a file complete, perhaps you could produce that in a reasonable time following this hearing and submit it at that time.
Absolutely.
A couple other questions about the analysis that your department undertook. There's a requirement in your code for a neighborhood meeting. And I know there was a meeting with the River and Streams Board. Was there a separate neighborhood meeting? Are you aware of that?
We combined them.
Okay. A couple other areas that occurred before this hearing, but just to help me understand what transpired. You indicated there was a administrative adjustment and interpretation back in September of 2016 for a couple of adjustments. A reduction of tree retention was one. And were these done after a complete application, or what information was relied upon to do those?
So it was based on the critical area map that was provided, so you can see, part of it was looking at how much of this property is already encumbered by critical areas, that the amount of developable land left is a subset, is a minority of the total amount of land. So part of the rationale was there'll still be quite a bit of vegetation left on this property. In addition to, as I mentioned earlier, the property immediately to the east is owned by the state park, and that's forested property and will stay that way.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. You relied upon the critical areas itself to determine some development area needed to be provided.
Right.
Okay. And then, same with the street standard variations. Some were issued for roads A, B, C, and D. Is that something that shows on a preliminary plat map, or how would I know in looking at the plat layout what those deviations might be? Or maybe there's a simple answer.
So the street standard deviations were, and I'd have to go back and actually look at those. That was exhibit. Setbacks.
And that's one challenge I had. You did include the administrative interpretation as an exhibit, preliminary plat, exhibit 2, but I didn't see what the road deviations might be. Is that a document that exists?
It is. It should have been attached if it was not. That was my error. I apologize.
There again, that's fine. There's a lot of material to pull together. And maybe that could be also then provided after the hearing date today?
Absolutely.
Okay. And those are ones that have been approved under independent authority. You're not asking that I look at those, but we have the proposed plat in front of us, which is based upon deviations from road standards. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Another document that's referenced a number of times is a geotechnical analysis. Is that something that could be made available as well? And the reason I'm asking is a number of the conditions refer to that, and it's a challenge for me to know when it says shall comply with geotechnical recommendations. Does that exist and could be provided?
It does. It's in my file. I can give you a
Okay.
copy of that.
And it's difficult to get the balance to, you don't want to give every document for a hearing, and yet we need to have sufficient documents so we can have facts to rely upon to make the findings necessary for criteria. So there's several documents, it looks like maybe 5 in number. There's a wetland and stream survey, a critical area evaluation, and a arborist report. And if I list those in a post-hearing order, I'm assuming they're available because they're noted in your staff report, but it'd be very helpful because the way they're referenced is that, as discussed in the arborist report, a condition is necessary. That'd really help. Is that something I could ask for post-hearing?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Similar with stormwater, and I know you evaluated that, and there's some indication on the plat layout, but that's become a especially important finding. We've had directives from the judicial system lately about how stormwater and water availability need to be addressed. So I'm assuming there's some report available that did the stormwater drainage analysis.
Yes, there's a technical stormwater report.
Great, very helpful. And then the other water areas, water supply, and I think you already noted this in your conditions, that those certificates of availability would need to be provided, correct?
Right.
And you may have those, you may be able to obtain those, but at least some indication from I guess I'm keenly aware of the need for coordination between City of Sammamish, governmental entities, and City of Issaquah. There's always this overlap and maybe even a little bit of tension sometimes. So some indication, if there's not a certificate, maybe some memo or some other indication of availability. And this is not all on your shoulders. Some of this is you or the applicant shall provide.
Right, I believe the applicant has those.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And final procedural question I have for you is in a different role that you play with the city, which is as responsible official for SEPA. And under that role, it looked to me like you might have combined, normally a variance is exempt from SEPA, but did you look at the critical area variance along with the plat when that analysis was done?
I did, because there were definitely critical area impacts that needed to be evaluated.
And when I looked at the MDNS, or DNS, and that's Exhibit V6. The curious thing was about the signature date, and it may just be how you process things, but you'll note that it was signed on August 18. And I think earlier it was referenced that's the date that the comment period or appeal period closed. So it must have been issued prior to that. Is that just a process thing that's the way you do it?
So the appeal period closed at 5 o'clock. I would guess with you, since I don't recall exactly, that I was still working on this application past 5 o'clock. So it was still, I think, legitimately the 18th, but it was following the closure of the appeal period.
That's the period that it closed.
Right.
So the issuance was sometimes earlier. And that's my question. Do you sign it when the appeal period closes, or is it signed at the time of issuance?
I signed this following the closure of the appeal period.
Okay. Oh, there is one other process question. There were, in your staff report on the preliminary plat, you noted that the East Side Fire and Rescue reviewed and commented on the proposed development, and that those comments were incorporated. Was there a copy of the comments? Were there some conditions proposed by Fire Marshal? And the reason I ask about that is that the Fire Marshal is considered an expert on what's needed for conditioning and for review. And you may recall whether, was that a telephone conversation or did you get a memo from the Fire Marshal?
It would have been written. So I will provide the hearing examiner with comments from all the departments that provided comments on this application.
Okay, that's all I have for you, and I want to thank you for pulling this together. And I think it's fair to say your department's experienced some transition lately, and normally I don't see you at these hearings, and I understand the challenge of pulling all this information together in a timely fashion, which you are always operating under deadlines. So I thank you for the work you did and your willingness for being able to supply some of the information after the hearing. If others in attendance, applicant or public, feels that they need to see some of those, I assume they're available in the department, and they can look at what will be in my post-hearing order, and if they want to comment on it, they can comment. I'll give a date for that as well.
Sure.
And I think that's a workable way to proceed. So again, I thank you for the effort that you went to get all of this together to be able to present at today's hearing.
Thank you.
We'll then turn to an applicant representative. I think we got a number on the team. Who's with the applicant here today? Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. Did you draw straws, or who's going to be the spokesperson for the applicant?
I will take the lead on that.
Great, good. Please come forward. Where are you most comfortable? You can either be at the table or at the podium?
Table's fine for me.
Okay, great.
Great.
You don't have any fancy
Okay.
PowerPoint to present or anything like that?
I don't. We've prepared a few exhibits here for you.
Okay, great. So the first thing we're going to do is ask that you take the oath by raising your right hand. Do you swear to tell truth and testimony you give today?
I do.
Thank you. And please identify yourself.
My name is Leo Suver. I'm the president of Steve Bernstead Construction and the applicant.
Very good. And you heard the city's presentation. Maybe we start there. Is there anything that you wanted to add or correct about that presentation?
I'd like to make one correction in the staff report as a part of the presentation that Mr. Niven gave earlier, and it has to do with the King County Regional Trail, which I'll go into a little bit more.
Okay.
And it's really recommendation number 1, which says on sheet 11, a King County Regional Trail will be provided as generally shown in Exhibit 3. That was prepared as part of our original application and the result of a proposal I had made to King County Parks previously. Subsequently, they've decided that that's not the proposed trail alignment that I had placed was not a viable option for them. And I wanted to point out that the property does contain 2 easements that are granted to King County Parks. There is a 30-foot wide easement that runs the length of Southeast 43rd. And there's also the 50-foot easement that Mr. Niven referred to along the northern edge of the property. It's required that King County Parks has an easement for future construction of a trail, but it does not require that us as the applicant construct the trail. And as Mr. Niven mentioned also, we have had a series of meetings with Parks. I'd say they've been constructive, but they haven't led to any firm decisions. And as an alternate, we provided a separate site layout which removes our property lines and completely takes out the impact from our lots over a portion of 50-foot easement that we had provided in our initial application.
Is this what is in the memo that Mr. Niven presented today?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and it's 3 pages, and the last page, I believe, shows what you just testified about.
That's correct.
Okay.
Just more of a little background explanation on that.
All right, and you did review that memo, and it suggests that there would be a replacement of condition 25. Is that something you're in agreement with?
I definitely am. I think it just failed to mention, if that is the case, that it would take away condition 1, which was construction of the trail. It would replace, I'm sorry, both 1, 2, and 20, condition 25.
Okay, and Mr. Niven, was that your intent when you drafted that memo?
I'm finding condition 1. I'm not Mike. Yes, I agree that 25 should replace 1, 2, and 20.
Okay, thank you for catching that and bringing that to my attention. So it's really deleting 1, 2, and 20 and putting this one in the memo in its place. Is that it? Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to touch on a few points, and then I will also turn things over to several of the consultants that I've brought along. To reiterate that we are proposing a softer use of the site than what the current zoning allows, which would have been 29 units to the acre. Our current density with the total developable area is far lower than that. And if we look over the entire site, it's a little over 2 units. If we look over the total developable site, when we remove our critical areas, it's 4.5 units to the acre. We have met with King County Parks, as I said, on a number of different occasions. I will continue that discussion to see if there's common ground for our organization to actually construct portions of the regional trail on behalf of King County, if we can arrive at some equitable arrangements there. At this time, we are not proposing to construct. I'd like to also address several of the comments that were received from the public. One was from State Parks, and I wanted to note that I did meet with Nikki Fields, representative from Washington State Parks, regarding our site specifically. She reiterated several of the concerns that she had with our land plan. I offered to provide fencing along our western border of the site where we border the state park with signage notification to prevent unauthorized entrance into the state park area, and public notice that was not open for, she was concerned about trail construction and creep from nearby neighbors.
It's along the western property line? Is that where that would be?
It's along the eastern property.
Eastern?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we also received a number of comments from the Homeowners Association across 43rd, which is Alta at the Lake. And they had several comments regarding traffic, which I've brought Jeff Schramm from 10W to testify on. They also made comments about parking, which I'd like to reiterate that our proposal, as it stands, we propose to have 2 parking spaces, garage parking spaces for each unit we construct. We also intend to construct our driveways to provide an additional 2 parking spaces for each unit. And we also, as a result of that comment, added the 6 additional guest parking spaces on top of the vault. There was also concerns about the location of our project entry. Early on in our feasibility of the site, we determined that there was no opportunity to access the site due to steep slopes and wetlands, other than the location that we've shown on our site plan, which is the reason for our request for variance, which cuts through a portion of the stream buffer.
Okay, could you back up a minute and tell me about I believe the condition reads longer driveways where feasible to accommodate 2 additional vehicles.
We intend to have all driveways a minimum of 18 feet in length to accommodate vehicles.
Okay, so that's something different, I believe, than the condition on all lots. And in addition then, where are these 6 guest spaces?
I'll show you. They're going to be located here on top of the vault,
Oh, okay,
and we've shown them in this exhibit here.
thank you.
We also received a comment from the Snoqualmie tribe related to cultural resources. That comment just came in last Monday. I hadn't received anything previously, but I did want to note that I've retained an expert that will provide a full cultural survey of the site, and we will submit that to the city as part of our permit application for development.
Mr. Niven, do you recall, is that a condition that you included? Maybe not, but that's very helpful, and I want to make sure we capture that. And when I refer to the condition, it's not that this then becomes a demand, but it captures what you've agreed to do, and I think then is a helpful notice to anyone that reviews the decision.
Great. It's not currently in the staff report because of its recentness in arrival. But because the applicant is willing to do that and has made that commitment, I think it is noteworthy and should be added to kind of the outcome.
And this would be a cultural survey prior to final plat approval. Is that how you
Correct.
see it?
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
There were also concerns that were raised from the representatives of the Muckleshoot tribe regarding potential impacts to fish-bearing streams and habitat. I've brought along my expert from Talisea, Bill Shields, who will testify about the measures that we are taking to preserve, as well as the previous work that's done to restore the wetland area there as a part of the original development of the
Mr.
site.
Niven, I don't believe I have the comments from these tribes. Is that something you could provide? I assume they came into the city.
There were letters at the back of the hearing examiner's report.
Oh, are they in the file?
If they're not attached, I will send you a copy of the email we received from the Muckleshoots.
Thank you.
I believe all of these are referenced in the back of the report.
Okay, thank you.
And with that, I think I'll turn things over to Bill Shields at Talisea for a presentation on our wetland mitigation and buffers.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Sipper. Good afternoon, sir. Can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell truth and testimony you give today?
I do.
Thank you. And your name again?
Bill Shields, Talisea Consultants.
S-H-I-E-L-D-S?
No D.
Okay, Shields. Thank you.
Okay.
And
Where's the mouse?
what's your expertise? Are you project engineer, or what
No,
is?
I am a wetlands ecologist.
Wetlands ecologist, thank you.
Okay. I think I can see that from here. Let me. Okay. Let me go to the next. How did I do that, Keith? I'm almost breaking my neck here. Where's the next?
You want to go back to your...
No, the next one. It's out of order.
Oh.
What did it show, the original one?
You can go back to the file.
Ah, okay. This is different than working on at my desk. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what this shows, it's already been reviewed, but I think what's important that may not be fully understood, and I have some slides that support this, the pink area is all work that was done with the development on the northwest side of 43rd for that residential development. It was work that was done both on the stream and on the wetlands and in the buffers. And so what was indicated up here is this is wetland B, and wetland B actually doesn't have, by municipal code, Issaquah Municipal Code, a buffer. Nevertheless, it will not be impacted directly at all. It's a little congested there. What the plan is to have a box culvert that would span wetland B. It would not have any direct impact on the stream. There is a stormwater vault, which is shown there, that Sherry or Jim will talk about from Core Design on the stormwater system. But the discharge from that will occur down here in the buffer of wetland A. And that water, and that discharge point is taken that far down because of the need for that elevation so that we can get the proper slope. And that will be dispersed in the wetland buffer as a gentle entry of stormwater, treated stormwater, before it enters the wetland and then subsequently the stream. One of the comments that Karen Walter of the Muckleshoot tribe had was concerning fish, and not only fish in Many Springs Creek, which this is, and by the way, this drawing doesn't show it, but it actually extends all the way down to very close to East Lake Sam and conflues with Laughing Jacobs Creek. Laughing Jacobs Creek does support salmonids, in fact does support Chinook salmon, which is a federally listed species, and it's very likely that juvenile fish would find their way into Many Springs Creek. So we're considering all of Many Springs Creek as fish bearing, and the buffers are correspond to that. The closest point of Laughing Jacobs Creek is over 350 feet from the closest part of the development of this subdivision. So it's substantially removed. Okay, I think the other things that, if I can go to, oh my gosh, how do I do that? Close the current, okay. This is a little bit more detail. We do recognize that there is a trail here that's proposed, and as Leo explained, and I think that the more current information is that the trail will extend up 43rd Way. But my understanding is that there's some lane change, and Jeff Sharam will address that. The width of that would be such that there would not be an encroachment of the trail in toward the critical areas. But I leave that to Jeff to explain in detail on that. Any disturbance along this area would be enhanced in the buffer. And this is a water treatment system, a modular wetland vault, where my cursor is right there. And that would be the treatment system for this small amount. This is a relatively small vault storage compared to the major vault that Leo has just pointed out as supporting 6 parking stalls that he just pointed out. So again, this vault is the box culvert would rely upon a portion of that vault as a basis for building that box culvert, a bottomless culvert, and there would not be any direct impact on a wetland or a stream. There are only wetland buffer impacts. So, am I doing that right? Okay. Oh my. Keith, okay, maybe it's on this little thing right here. You can tell I'm not very high tech. Oh boy. Okay. Okay, I do have a PowerPoint that goes through a lot of the construction. I think many people don't understand, we're not aware of the substantial amount of work that was done in context of mitigation for the property on the other side of 43rd. The mitigation was done on this side of the road. Some was done on the other side, but most of it was done here. It had to do with some stream realignment, and as you can see here, the understory vegetation was taken out. There was an effort made to keep almost a 6-inch tree by wrapping jute around the base of those trees and planting that area. Substantial amount of large woody debris was installed, all of which is important to fish life. Because it's so overgrown right now, I think most people, and I haven't talked to Karen Walter about this specifically, but I really don't think that she was aware of the work that was done for habitat enhancement of Many Springs Creek and its associated wetlands. I think that, I can't get into all of the pictures, but it's pretty much, I think, reflected by these 6 pictures right here.
Well, that's, I think, sufficient, because we heard testimony earlier that there would not be a need for a variance from the wetland area, and I think you just explained how it would be protected. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So that fits the earlier testimony from the city. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there other representatives of the applicant that wanted to speak to the application?
Jeff Schramm from 10W will give a brief presentation on traffic analysis for the site.
Okay. Good afternoon.
I'm ready.
And do you swear to tell truth and testimony you give?
I do.
Thank you.
My name is Jeff Schramm. Last name is Schramm. I am an engineer with Transportation Engineering Northwest. We go by 10W. I was the project manager responsible for the traffic analysis we conducted for this project. I believe in the record is our technical memo and traffic analysis dated December 14th, 2016, in which we conducted a report and evaluated the traffic impacts of this project. The analysis was conducted consistent with city guidelines and industry standards. And one of the things, what I'd like to do today is sort of do an overview or describe the analysis that we conducted, but also in doing so, address some of the public comments that came as part of the review process as well. To start, what I'd like to do is do a quick description of Southeast 41st Place, which is the location of the access. The road is a 4-lane road. It's really 2 lanes up the hill, 2 lanes down the hill, posted 40 miles per hour. The access point, which we have heard earlier today, was determined to be really the only feasible access due to environmental constraints. And so the focus of our analysis was to identify the traffic impacts of that, of locating one access, a single access for this entire development at that location, and identify any measures necessary to mitigate those impacts. To conduct our analysis, we collected traffic counts based on industry standards during the morning and afternoon peak hours, which is a standard practice. And we considered the additional traffic that would be generated by 34 units. Approximately 389 daily trips, and between 35 and 40 peak hour trips would be added at this access location, which is essentially in alignment opposite existing access point that is noted as 213th Place Southeast. As part of our analysis, we evaluated morning and afternoon peak hour levels of service at the adjacent roundabout at Southeast 43rd Place, or I'm sorry, Southeast 43rd Way and East Lake Sammamish Parkway, and also evaluated levels of service at the access point. As part of that analysis of the access point, and really this focuses on a lot of the public comment as well, we did a fairly comprehensive evaluation of that access point given the speeds of traffic that exists there, as well as the existing driveway access across the street. As part of our analysis, we evaluated site distance to ensure that there is adequate and safe site distance for vehicles entering and exiting that access point. We collected a speed study, which is essentially a way of identifying what the existing travel speeds on the road. It's not necessarily a standard practice, but in this case was important for us as we evaluated safety and levels of service. The speed study determined that we use a term called the 85th percentile speed. It was determined to be between 42 and 43 miles per hour, so a couple miles per hour over the speed limit. From a design perspective, when we evaluate levels of service and site distance, we considered a 45-mile-an-hour design speed. So the speed study confirmed, and the data collection confirmed, that we were using an adequate design speed in our considerations. We also reviewed a 3-year accident history, collisions along Southeast 43rd Way, and particularly at this access location. And then, based on all that data, we evaluated turns in and out of the driveway and in and out of the access point.
And this is all in the memo that you
This is all in the
prepared.
memo, right.
I don't have that, but I assume I'm going to get it
Okay.
post-hearing. But just to, and I'm familiar with all the terms you're using, but you went quickly past level of service, LOS, existing and with the proposed development. Can you give me that now? Is that in front of you?
Sure.
And both at the access point and the turnaround. And from my review of the comments, that's where the key concerns were.
Okay. So you're correct that all this information is in the memo. At the roundabout, the East Lake Sammamish Parkway, Southeast 43rd Way roundabout, would you like the existing and the with project separate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, existing, the roundabout as an entirety in the morning AM peak hour is operating at level service C, with the added traffic from some background growth and with the Mallard Bay project would continue to operate at level service C. During the PM peak hour, the roundabout is operating at level service B, but it's right on the border between the B and C designation. With the additional traffic, it would operate at level service C, both of which are considered acceptable based on City of Issaquah standards. To give you the level service analysis results at the access point, what I'd like to do first, Mr. Examiner, is kind of describe what we are proposing that access configuration look like and how it should operate. The existing access point, as I mentioned, serves across the street, Southeast 213th Place. There is an existing C curb down the middle of the road which restricts or limits left turn access in and out of that driveway. So when we propose our driveway, if we were just to introduce a new access point, it would also then be limited to only provide right turn in and right turn out with no left turn access. Given the fact that we've estimated that the predominant flow of traffic in and out of the site would be toward East Lake Sammamish Parkway on the order of about 90% based on traffic volumes, we anticipate a fairly heavy need for a left turn out. With the existing configuration only providing, or because of the C curb would only provide right turn in and right turn out, all vehicles would have to turn right to exit. And in our experience, in my professional opinion, forcing vehicles to turn right and then maneuver, create U-turn maneuvers at private driveways in the middle of the road is both unsafe and not preferred. So we then looked at the opportunity to provide a merge lane out, and that became a primary recommendation of our analysis. So as we considered that maneuver, we factored in site distance, travel speeds, traffic volumes, the presence of the driveway across the street, as well as the proximity of the roundabout down the hill. And we had, so our proposal is really what we identified as the preferred solution would be to widen Southeast 43rd Place, as is shown in a variety of exhibits here, to provide a center turn merge lane and a maneuver that would allow an exiting left turn from the site onto Southeast 43rd. And what we believe that does is it would reduce the number of unsafe and illegal left turn maneuvers by adequately providing that the primary movement out of exiting the site.
Would that in any way benefit existing residents that commented on this? And I assume they live across from
Right,
this
directly
proposed
across.
development?
It wouldn't, I think you asked, would it benefit them? And the answer is no, it would not benefit them. This is to accommodate what we've identified to be the impact of adding a new, this new development. It would not change their configuration because it would
So
continue
that
to
was
be-
more the goal, is to not to any way disturb or
Right.
worsen the condition.
Right, so they would continue to have limited to right in and right out maneuvers. So to answer the question of levels of service, when we add the left turn maneuvers in that configuration, the exiting vehicles for 34 units would operate at level service C for exiting maneuvers in both the AM and PM peak hours. And I guess that's really the extent of our of my presentation. Really, was to sort of set or describe the conditions in which we evaluated that, and really that's our primary mitigation measure that we've identified. And I'm here as well if there are other questions that you have or if the public has as a result of that this presentation.
I think you gave a thorough presentation. I'm handicapped a bit by not having your memo, but it sounds like it's quite detailed. Did you come up with any problems with sight distance? Because a
No,
number of the comments, the statement
Right.
was coming down the hill,
Right.
it's in excess of 50 miles an hour.
Right.
You planned for 45. What kind of allowances were there when you did that sight distance planning?
yeah. Well, as I mentioned, that we evaluated sight distance based on a 45 mile an hour design speed, and the speed study confirmed it was a few miles an hour less than that. So based on that design speed, churning maneuvers at the location of the access would meet city and AASHTO sight distance standards.
Okay. I am curious about your comment that the development across the road would not be in any way disturbed or the conditions wouldn't worsen, but there'd be more traffic. It would do 389 vehicle trips
Yeah,
per
and
day.
I realized as you asked that and I answered, I think my answer was it wouldn't benefit them further. They would be impacted by the additional traffic that
There's
is
fewer
turning-
gaps in
yeah,
which to exit, correct?
turning in and out of the street. However, what I would say is for vehicles that exit their site and turn right, there are two downhill lanes. The merge lane that we're proposing, given the proximity of the roundabout, would be merging into the inside lane, while the residents who exit currently out of their driveway, I would expect, most to be, merging into the outside lane.
So level of service measures the delay in moving forward, is that?
Yeah, level of service measures the average delay of a vehicle that is exiting from the stop maneuver, so exiting the site.
I'm curious about, roundabout,
Yeah.
how does that apply?
Oh, the roundabout is, it's a similar, it's still the average delay, the amount of delay time that a vehicle would experience to slow down and maneuver, and in some cases,
Uneducated
merge.
driver that
Right, right,
stops at the
right,
roundabout.
Right, and there's measures that we have
Okay.
identified to do that. And I realize now, Mr. Examiner, that I did fail to mention one additional item, and that was we did consider the need for a left turn in. So turning left into the site from Southeast 43rd Way. And we determined, given the right-of-way constraints, the speed, and the fact that the roundabout would provide a very proximate maneuver if someone who is coming from up the hill wanting to turn into the site, that they could proceed down the hill, use the roundabout, and turn into the site with a right turn lane, and not to create another potential conflict point. We felt like that was an adequate maneuver that people would be able to utilize.
Is that part of the proposal, is to have some kind of barrier to encourage
We would
going
propose
around?
that C curbing, as it exists
Yeah.
today, would be a part of the design of
Okay,
that maneuver.
good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for explaining the report, and I look forward to further review of it.
Thank you.
Any further presentation by the applicant?
No, we do have representatives from our engineer if we need backup.
Great,
For future.
great, good. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, very informative, and addressing the concerns that were raised during public review of this proposal. I now, though, want to open it up to any additional comments from those that are in attendance from the public that might want to have an opportunity to raise any questions or concerns. Is there anyone here that does want to testify? We have two individuals, it looks like. Sure, please come forward, sir. Either you can sit or stand, it's your option.
I'm used to the podium.
Very good.
I was just putting the map
Oh,
back
am
up.
I going to get a speech, or?
Do you want just the map with the critical areas?
That one with all the wetland would be
Yeah,
good.
I'm working towards it.
Thank you.
There we go.
Good afternoon. I'll first ask you to raise your hand and take the oath. Do you swear to tell truth and testimony you give today?
I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. I'm Vice President of the Issaquah Trails Club.
Hold on a minute. Kapler is K?
K-A-P-P-L-E-R, K-Apple R, as my students.
And you're Vice President of the Issaquah Trails?
Issaquah Alps Trails Club, and I'm chair of kind of a subcommittee of the Friends of Lake Sammamish State Park, dealing with trails within and connecting to the state park. First, I retired from the city council 8 years ago in Mallard Bay. Maybe we're going to be done with this finally, but it's been dragging on that whole time since then. And I think we're getting close. You mentioned earlier, we've gone through some changes and different things with staffing in the city. It is a little frustrating that the staff report still isn't on the city website. The notice I got on April 16th or 18th references that you can go to the city hall and see the staff report, but preliminary staff report. But that's something we need to work on. It's not a fatal flaw, but it's just something I hope we see resolved better. It's really nice, the city website right now, in terms of most of the documents, up to a certain older documents, but a lot of them are on the site, and it's quite an improvement. But we still have a ways to go on that. Trail resolution, there's concerns from the state park about potential trails, not the official trail, but trails going into their property, and we will need to deal with that. But it sounds like we'll get together with the applicant in the King County and we'll work out that trail issue. It is an important issue. It's something we've been working on for literally decades, trying to connect the Sammamish Plateau, Pine Lake Plateau as we used to call it, with the East Lake Sammamish Trail and Lake Sammamish State Park. We're doing really well on some other connections, especially with the city on the state park, connecting to Squaw Mountain State Park along the creek corridor and all of that. This has been a long time frustration. This isn't going to finish it and make the connection, but it's a key part of making that connection. So I'm encouraging that to take place.
And are you comfortable with the proposal then we heard today?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, it sounds like there's going to be a resolution. What King County is comfortable with, well, I'd certainly be comfortable with it.
Okay.
I think there's, I guess in my next comment is, I don't know how, in the CCC and ours or whatever, there's homeowners type agreement here. I think it needs to make it clear that creating trails and accessing that state park is not something that should be happening, and that homeowners association should be aware of that, and that needs to be communicated to home buyers and that kind of thing.
But you heard the applicant offer that there'd be a fence along the east property
And
line.
signage, which is all
And
sounds
signage.
good.
And
That's-
given your experience with trails, I was pondering what kind of signage is effective? Don't go here, I mean, or is it something
No, I
more
think it's-
informative?
You know, I'm not sure. I think it needs to say it needs to be acknowledged as state park property, and access is now permitted or something like that.
Or that there's another access point.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
yeah.
it.
Please use
Please
authorized
use
authorized
authorized
trails,
access,
that kind of thing.
yeah.
So it's, some of that state park property directly east of this is nice open woods, but then as you get further south, it is pretty crazy ground. I was amazed when I got in there a year ago and how much up and down there was, wetlands and some wild country in there, surprisingly wild when I was thinking how really close I was to East Lake Sammamish Parkway. Also, this green area is an important wetland area, and I'm hoping that the long-term responsibility for that and the other property that the homeowner association, I assume, will be owning will be addressed in that there will be some responsibility described for them in terms of protection and maintenance of all of this important wetland and creek area. There's been a lot of investment already in parts of it, and it needs to be, managed over the long term to be successful. Otherwise, this will be a wasted effort. There's significant cost that's been done already, and ongoing maintenance will be essential. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Thank you for all the work that you've done on parks and our trails and trail connections.
Keep at it. Thank you.
Good. We had one other individual that wanted to present some testimony today. If you'd like to come forward to the podium, we'll take that testimony now.
Hey, good afternoon, Examiner Hunter. My name is Lauren
Please raise your
Belisky.
right hand and take the oath first. You
Yeah.
swear to tell truth and
Absolutely.
testimony you give today.
Yes.
Thank you. And what's your name again?
My name is Lauren Belisky. I'm a real property agent with King County DNR Parks.
You're going to need to spell that last name, please.
That's B as in boy, A-L-I-S-K-Y. And I came today to speak a little bit on the easement issue and to provide some background on the language that's in the easement and how that affects the proposed preliminary plat layout.
So you're with the King County Real Estate
I'm with the
Division, or-
King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks, in the Parks Division, in their Capital and Land Management Group as a real property agent. I know it's a mouthful.
Does it all fit on one card, or do you carry two?
Good question. Mine haven't showed up yet.
I was going to ask for your card if you had one, but you don't.
Well,
Okay.
I will send you one courtesy of Mr. Niven here.
Thank
So
you.
I wanted to thank you for providing us with the opportunity to comment today and to review this project. It is our understanding that this is a proposal for a 34-lot subdivision. It appears, I've been seeing different numbers, so I'm not entirely clear on that right now, on property containing wetland streams, steep slopes, and a permanent trail as easement granted to the Department of Natural Resources and Parks. This easement was negotiated as part of a sale from King County to Issaquah in late 2015. So this is a fairly new easement and not news to the city or to the applicant.
You say easement. I heard earlier 2 easements. Is it considered one easement?
It is all one easement in this deed, and I will provide you a copy of this once I am done speaking.
Thank you.
So the current configuration, which is the configuration we had as of this morning, and the proposed configuration with the hammerhead turnaround over the easement area is currently unacceptable and interferes with the easement rights in the county. Those plans that we did have access to were the ones available online. We just got access to the staff report and attachments this morning, unfortunately. That original configuration showed 5 lots over the top of the easement area, the 50-foot portion at the northern end of the lot. The new configuration shows the hammerhead turnaround covering approximately half of that easement area. The easement that we have recorded as part of the deed, that's auditor file number 2015-1231-01105. Again, I'll provide you a copy with that. States really in sum that the right to develop that trail easement area are solely for the county. The applicant or the property owner does have limited rights for ingress, egress, and utilities, but they are fairly restrictive. So the right to remove vegetation, change the topography, construct any kind of trail area, et cetera, is solely at the discretion of the county. And so at this point, we have been working with the developer, with our division head, Kevin Brown, our engineering team, our regional trails team, to try to come to some kind of agreement. But at this point, we're not there yet. Those negotiations did start back in March, but in the absence of a technical report to evaluate the feasibility of putting in a trail at the original proposed location or any new proposed location, at this point, we're just needing to continue negotiations until we come to a conclusion. So that's really the sum of my comments today, but again, I do have a copy of that deed with the easement language, as well as my more formal letter that I had written to submit today.
Okay, so we will take, did you bring those documents today?
I did,
You can
yes.
submit them? So we'll take those into evidence and have them submitted as hearing exhibits 3 and 4. Did you get a chance to look at the Niven memo that was drafted proposing a change in the condition?
I did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Which one did you identify as 3?
The letter.
Okay, thank you.
Due to our division director's involvement in this, I'm really not comfortable speaking on his behalf. He has been very actively engaged in it. I do not believe he would have a problem with them, but again, I don't want to speak for him on this.
This is the proposed condition,
Proposed conditions, yes.
which, when I read it, it sounds like it does what you were testifying to about ongoing
Correct.
negotiations.
Yeah, I haven't been there long enough to, to be comfortable speaking for Director Brown.
Well, I'm inclined to do what the city and applicant agreed to as far as that condition. But I wouldn't want to be viewed as interfering with the county's easement rights. Did you see anything in the condition that would interfere with easement rights?
It doesn't appear to.
Okay, that's fine. I'll take that. And, and I'm not going to resolve any conflicts about the easement, but I do encourage you to continue discussions, and maybe we need a time frame on that. They've been going on for quite some time, and I guess the concern I would have is that ongoing discussions may not result in resolution. Often deadlines are important. So it says now, the county will agree to exchange existing easements for a new easement.
I believe there was an either/or. So there was an option 1, and alternative 2 was to agree to do an exchange,
Yes,
if I remember
A or
correctly.
B, right. And right now, it's prior to the submittal of final plat documents. That is somewhat of a deadline, but it's varied from 5 to 7 years over the last few years. Is there any anticipation on your part? Is there a need from the county's point of view to resolve this more quickly in 5 to 7 years?
I imagine that the applicant, in my experience with preliminary plats and construction, would want to get this resolved much sooner than later. We're certainly actively discussing it with them. We did have a meeting with them last week. I unfortunately was out of town and unable to attend, so it is moving along. Whether or not that's coming to a conclusion that results in an alteration of the plat configuration, or if it means leaving the easement as is, or if it means doing some kind of trail construction, I can't tell you at this time, since we haven't come to any kind of agreement of that sort. But at this point, from our perspective, it's premature to come to an agreement without understanding the feasibility of doing so.
Mr. Super, what did you view as a reasonable time frame for trying to resolve this?
5 to 7 weeks would be great for me. So, I think we've been at it for a long time, and I think once we receive, assuming we'll receive a hearing examiner's decision, we would want to move forward with our plat engineering. And I think that the layout of the project could be affected by that, and I'll have to make decisions one way or the other. So,
Right. Well, what I'm inclined to do is to give maybe an 8-week period, and if you don't reach agreement, you'll come back here and tell me why you haven't, because it could affect the layout. And I'm a little uncomfortable approving a plat that may look different than what I approved, and maybe in a major way, because this condition does leave quite a bit of flexibility. So I'm inclined to do that. I think my experience with negotiation or mediation, whichever way you proceed, deadlines are useful and help you come to an agreement. That may be more rapidly than the county is used to working, but a 2-month period, you're already engaged in discussion.
Yes.
And failure to agree within that 2 months, I'll give some date certain, means that you return to this forum and report what's happened, or at least give a written report.
yes, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. Okay? That acceptable?
Yes, we are willing to work in a good faith effort with the...
Yeah, I think it's kind of a progress report, but it's an encouragement of, let's meet that deadline of November 30th, so we don't have to do this report back and maybe have the hearing reopened.
Will you or Director Niven provide us with a date certain in writing?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It would be, what I'm looking at doing is slightly revising the proposed condition that Mr. Niven circulated earlier, because it now reads, prior to submittal of final plat documents, the applicant will either, and it gives the 2 options that you referenced. And that just seems like that could be a long ways away. And it doesn't really give an incentive to come to an agreement. So probably November 30th is the reasonable date. And if not agreed, report back, and the hearing may need to be reopened. I think that's the way I would structure it. It gives you a target date, and believe me, I don't want to reopen the hearing, but if it's not resolved, I think we may need to do that. Okay, so I'll revise that condition accordingly. Is there anything else, Ms. Malinsky, that you'd like to say?
No, thank you, Examiner Hunter. I
Thank you for
appreciate it.
coming today and providing that input. It's very useful. Is there anyone else present that wanted to provide any testimony? Okay, any need for further response from applicant or city?
No.
Well, then, we're coming to a conclusion of the hearing today, but the record will be kept open, and we discuss throughout the hearing the additional material that will need to be provided. Would the end of next week be sufficient time?
Yeah, absolutely. Take me 2 days.
Oh, well, you give me the date that you would want to.
Let's say by the 27th of September.
Okay, and the applicant will get a copy, and I guess, did you have a sign-in sheet today with addresses
I did not.
for parties of record?
So I know the addresses of the parties of record, so I can go ahead and provide that to the hearing examiner.
Okay, so for parties of record, and that's those that testified today, you would be given an opportunity to review these documents. I don't expect that there would be any need to provide additional comment, but I'll give a brief period of time to comment on those if you desire. So they'd be provided by the 27th, and we'll probably allow for 1 week after that if anyone has any comments.
Could they be on the website?
The documents themselves?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the technology of the city.
Neither do I, so Christopher's nodding, so I'm going to say yes.
Okay. We have a professional planner in the room that committed to doing that, so thank you, Mr. Wright. All right, then we're going to adjourn the hearing today. The record's kept open. Once the record is closed, then I will issue the decision within 10 working days. Thank you all for your civility today and for your presentations that I found very informative and useful for preparing the decision. We are now adjourned.